Hi, Steve. Thank you. Good to hear from you. I have a couple questions. So one, personal matter. Our friends have children who continually respond to the parents with disrespect and disobedience. So, for example, they'll say the parents will tell them to do something and they'll get a look in the eye with a straight up no. So my first question is the parent sinning by not disciplining their child or giving them consequences? And two, if the parent is sinning, are my husband and I under some kind of godly obligation to lovingly confront?
Well, first of all, yes, a parent that does not correct their child is disobeying Scripture, and therefore that's sin. The Bible says, withhold not correction from the child, for if you discipline him, he will not die. Discipline him and save his soul from death, it actually says. The Bible indicates that children are born with a disposition. Proverbs calls it foolishness. It says foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod will drive it from him. Obviously, what the Bible teaches is that human children are born with a rebellious attitude toward authority. That rebellious attitude is toward the authority of God as well as toward God's appointed subordinates. And parents are given the stewardship. I mentioned that with reference to Adam and Eve being stewards of the earth. Parents are stewards of their children. And God expects them, as it says in Ephesians 6, to rear them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That is, you're responsible to teach your children how to be obedient to yourself and to God. And, of course, their obedience to the parent is obedience to God, because God says, obey your parents, for this is right. So God in Deuteronomy chapter 6 tells the Israelites to teach their children about God and how to teach their children to be obedient to God. In Deuteronomy 6:7, it says, these commandments you shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk with them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. Now, in other words, the children are supposed to be under continual discipleship. They're supposed to be taught to be obedient. A parent who does not do that, does not discipline the child, is a cowardly parent, does not want the child to be unhappy. And, they don't want the child not to like them. Now, it's not the parent's job to make their children like them. I remember a long time ago, Elizabeth Elliot being asked by a young mother about the young mother was just saying, it seems almost impossible for me to keep my daughter happy. And Elizabeth Elliot said, I had never heard that it was your responsibility to keep your daughter happy. It's your responsibility is to teach your children how to be good people, so that when they're adults, they'll be good adults. So you teach them how to be obedient and righteous, and they won't be happy a lot of the time. In fact, in Hebrews chapter 12, it says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time that it's administered, but afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who are exercised by it. So if you train your child against their will to be obedient, you're going to be doing something that they will not find pleasant. They won't be happy about that. Right. But afterward it yields results that they can thank you for. And children who are raised without discipline are very seldom, very disciplined and godly people when they grow older. Of course, they can become disciplined later on in life, but so much more difficult if they're never brought under discipline. Because when you don't bring a child under discipline, you're communicating to them by default that they really have the right to do pretty much whatever they want to do.
Right.
And to teach your child that they have the right to do whatever they want to do, whether you're doing it by word or by your actions, teaching them that, you're teaching them something that's false. They don't have the right to do whatever they want to do. They aren't gods. They aren't their own gods. They don't even have control over other people. The world is not going to give you everything you want. You should learn to be submissive to the will of God. And as a child, the will of God is for you to obey your parents. And parents are commanded to train their children up and to discipline them and to direct them in the right way. So a parent who doesn't do so is, yes, sinning. Now, the second question is, are you sinning if you don't correct them? I would say, I can't say this with the same degree of certainty, but I would say you should, of course, look for opportunities to do so. If you don't really have an opportunity that comes up, I wouldn't say that you've sinned for lack of creating an opportunity. But I would think the more you care about them, the more you care about them and the more you care about their children's well-being, the more you will look for that opportunity. When you talk to people about what they're doing wrong in raising their children, you're almost inviting an enemy for life.
I know.
Because mothers are especially very defensive of their children, fathers too sometimes, to the point where anyone who's critical of them, it seems like it's attacking their children. But of course, they even feel like you're attacking them. Many people are just not very interested in being corrected. They want to do what they want to do. That's why they let their children do what they want to do. They feel like, well, who am I to tell my child they can't do what they want to do? After all, I want to do what I want to do. A lot of times the parent who's not disciplining the child is simply a parent who's disobedient themselves. And because they want to do what they want without anyone challenging them, they let the child get away with doing what they want, overall challenges. So you're going to find it, in many cases, difficult to speak to parents who are not training their children properly. And I'm not saying you shouldn't speak to them. You'll be their best friend in reality if you do speak to them and if they receive it. If they don't receive it, they'll probably look at you as somebody who's meddlesome. But it depends on the kind of relationship you have with them. I mean, let's just say you're the grandparent and it's your children who are not disciplining their own children very well. I would say a grandparent has every right to speak up. I would say any good friend has the right to speak up. The truth is, anyone who sees something going wrong has the right to speak up, but they may not have earned the right in the sight of the person you need to speak to. They may not think you have the right to talk to them that way. So I guess the nature of the relationship is going to have the most to do with determining whether you can really speak to them or not. But are you sinning if you don't? I would say if God opens the opportunity, and it's a clear opportunity to speak to them about it, or you're looking for opportunities and one comes up and you don't speak, you're probably being negligent. But, it's really their responsibility more than yours. But we are our brother's keepers, too. And so if we see our brothers going the wrong way, we should do what we can to correct them, if they're willing to be corrected. And that's the big if.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate your wisdom.
Okay, Shauna, thanks for calling.
Okay, bye-bye.
God bless you. Bye now.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for taking my call.
Uh-huh.
Hi. So I have a question about disciplining children. Is it biblical to spank? I'm going to a counselor now who says that rules and punishment to discipline are not the best way to discipline a child, or punishment and rules.
Punishment and rules are not a good best way to train a child? Well, I think that's mistaken.
They say natural consequences are way longer lasting.
Well, yeah, but not all bad behavior has immediate consequences. I mean, it says in Ecclesiastes 8, because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the hearts of the sons of men are fully set in them to do evil. I mean, okay, if you don't make rules, the children don't instantly know what they should do or shouldn't do. Paul talks about when we were under the law, that was our childhood. We were under tutors and guardians. He says, now, when you become mature, you don't need the tutors and the guardians. Little children don't have internal controls. Therefore, they require external controls. That's why you have to tell them to brush their teeth. They wouldn't do it on their own ever. That's why you have to tell them to bathe. They probably wouldn't do that ever either. I mean, they don't have internal controls. They might never potty train themselves, if you didn't teach them. So the parents are there to place external controls on children who are too young and foolish to know to control themselves. Now, of course, by placing these controls, you're building a framework of behavior in their habits, which they will later, when they're older, see the reason for it, and then they'll do it not because you said so, but because they see the sense in it. They'll have the internal controls that you yourself have now. So, when someone says, "Well, don't make rules and discipline," that certainly isn't biblical. God certainly made rules,
Yeah.
and he disciplined.
I know. I'm so confused. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's just saying logical consequences.
Well, logical
or
consequences.
Natural consequences. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if a boy decides to fornicate with his girlfriend because no one told him any rules against it, and she doesn't get pregnant, then okay, well then he probably do it again. And if nothing bad happens, he'll probably do it again. Now, are there bad consequences come of this? Well, sometimes, yes. Sometimes not so obviously. I mean, there are bad consequences, but he can't necessarily see them. Namely, he's becoming established in sinful behavior and encouraged in it by the fact that nothing seems to happen negatively when he does it. In other words, you can do a lot of bad things for a long time before you see the damage it has done to your soul and the damage it has done to your self-control and the bondage it's brought you into, or before you have any physical consequences. Certainly, bad behavior has bad consequences, but some of those come on the day of judgment and no sooner.
Yeah, I think he was just saying it's better to talk, like take a time out and come back and talk and say, why did you make that choice?
Is this counselor a Christian? Is this counselor a Christian? And he's wiser than Solomon, I guess, right?
Well, I know everything he's saying is contradicting to what God, put in place.
So when a man says something that contradicts what God said, what's our response to that?
Yeah, I did bring up some verses, and he just doesn't see them the way I do.
Solomon wasn't perfect, but he was wiser than any counselor I've ever seen. And he definitely recommends physical discipline. He says that foolishness is born in the heart of a child, but the rod will drive it from him. That you can train him to be smart, wiser, by discipline. He says that he that spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves his son disciplines him promptly. There's lots of statements like that in Proverbs. Yeah. And God himself approves of it. God says, whom I love, I discipline and I chasten. In fact, Jesus says that. Jesus is quoted as saying that in what is it? I guess it's chapter 13 or 12 of Hebrews. It says, this is what Jesus says, whom I love, I discipline, I chasten. It's a loving thing. It says he disciplines the sons that he receives. Now, if it says in Hebrews, if you don't receive discipline from God, he doesn't receive you. You're not his son. Yeah. And certainly God is the model father. Now, obviously, we live at a time where you might get in legal trouble for physical discipline. And that's because our society is anti-God and anti-wisdom. They've chosen, about anything that's smart, our society has chosen the opposite. And we're seeing the consequences in the younger generations. But I will say some children grow up reasonably well without much or maybe any physical discipline. I think my grandmother told me she was never physically disciplined by her parents, and she behaved well. And some do. There are some compliant children. But you don't even have to think about discipline when children are already compliant. It's when they're not compliant. And that's what the Bible assumes is discipline is necessary. Now, can it be something other than the rod? Sure. If it works. The rod is faster. But of course, you could get into legal trouble these days. You shouldn't have any danger from that, but there is such. So you're going to have to be rather careful about that, I suppose, if you do that. But anyway, the Bible certainly indicates that physical discipline is a sensible way. Hey, I need to go. I'm sorry to say. You've been listening to The Narrow Path. We are listener-supported. If you'd like to help us stay on the air, you can go to our website, thenarrowpath.com, and see how to donate. Or just take stuff for free from thenarrowpath.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk again tomorrow.